Hello, my name is Neil Davidson and I'm the founder of Raw Umber Studios. Welcome to another online portrait drawing session. This video mimics the structure of a regular life drawing class. We'll show you 3 photographs on the screen, one for 10 minutes, one for 20 minutes and one for 30 minutes, and it's your job to draw the photograph that you see. Lizet will be joining us. She'll be doing a demonstration in the bottom corner of the screen and giving hints and tips. Once you've finished, don't forget to post your work to Instagram and hashtag it with #RawUmberLive. Right, let's get started.
Hello everyone and welcome to another Raw Umber video. Today, as per popular request, I will delve deeper into the Loomis method of constructing a head. He was an American illustrator from the 50s and he wrote a few very well-known and very good books on how to draw figures and heads. And in this session I want to just take you through his methods and hopefully we'll be able to draw a good portrait. So first of all, I just want to say that I will be working in charcoal pencil today, as well as just a normal white rubber. Of course, feel free to work in pencil or whatever medium you choose. So the Loomis method is a very well used method, and it starts with a simple circle. And in that circle, you can make a cross. So the first pose is a side view. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the horizontal line as his brow line and his vertical line for his center of the skull. So next we're going to put in his face shape. So you can imagine a line going from the front of the circle straight down to his chin. And then you can connect up the jaw using a diagonal that you can cut into that vertical line. Next, we also know that his ear, using this method, will be in that lower left quarter of the circle. Now, of course, this is an indication. Everyone's heads are slightly different, and Loomis method is idealized. So, for instance, if someone's got a weaker chin, you can make the angle a little bit more sloped inwards, and if someone's got a stronger chin, you can make that slope outwards. So next we're going to find his features, and as I used in my method as well, we have the rule of thirds. So you can divide the nose to the chin, the nose to the brow, and then finally the brow to the hairline into 3 equal parts. Now, of course, this is when he's looking straight. So when he'd be looking down or up, all these angles will be slightly different. This is just to simplify it a little bit. So now we have the mask of the face in. Now, what Loomis likes to do is shave off a little bit of that circle. Imagine it's going to be more like a tire shape instead of a perfectly round ball. And that will be the side of his skull. So let me just get a little bit of the nose in and the lips, and then I'll talk to you about measurements. So now I've got most of my features in. Let's talk about Loomis idealized measurements. So the main measurements you can use using that circle is the bottom of the top lip will line up with the bottom of the circle. The bottom of the nose will line up with the bottom of his ear, and his top of his brow will line up with the top of his ear. So let's put all these measurements on the side for a little bit. when you have his face, you can divide the chin to the top of his hairline up into 3 parts, which will be the bottom of his nose to the brow to the top of his hairline. Then, taking those 3 parts, you can divide those again into 3s, and the bottom of the top lip will be on the top 1/3 of the first 1/3, if that makes sense, and the eye, so the corners of the eye, will be the top 1/3 of the second slice of 1/3. So it's quite methodical, and it's really good to figure out idealized measurements and then see how your model changes from that and is different from that, and that's going to give you the likeness. On the other side, you can see that the eyes are pretty much perfectly halfway. So now we've got these idealized measurements, so we can have a look at how this would change if we had different types of models. So for instance, if somebody had a weak chin, you'd take that front line and you'd angle it further in. And you can see how different faces can be created using this method. So let's just get back to our standard face and talk a little bit about the jaw. Now I'm just going to draw a very simplified skull on top of this, just so you see how all these bits relate to the skull. And then I'm going to show you how it would work if the jaw would open and close. So as you can see, the hinge of the jaw is just below that midpoint and just in front of that ear. And you can also see that the top of his cheekbone lines up with the bottom of his eye socket there. So this is just for visual reference. Let me just get back to our standard model, and then I'll show you how the jaw moves in the skull. So like I said, that jaw hinges just below that midpoint of the circle. So when somebody would open their mouth, that jaw would hinge back and sort of swing on that midpoint. And so all I have to do is change my lines just a little bit, angle them a little bit more along that circle, and we've got an open jaw. Okay, so I know I didn't really draw the model for the first 10 minutes, but I just thought this was important. So you got to grips with the Loomis method, and then we will look at all the front measurements as well, and then finally draw a finished face. Okay, for this second pose, I just want to take you through all Loomis measurements and methods for the front of the face, and then finally put on our model's likeness on top. So let's start again with that same circle and that same cross. Now the difference between the cross on the side circle and the front circle is that this time the vertical line will be lining up with his center line, meaning that it will line up with the center of his chin to the center of his eyes. Now, do you remember what I said about slicing off a little bit of the circle on the side? On the front, you can see this very, very clearly. So we can just slice off a little bit on every side. And so this makes the skull a bit more of a tire sort of like shape, if you can imagine that. Round at front, but flat on both sides. Okay, so next we can put in the jaw using the side of that tire shape. And the nose will be roughly halfway that jawline to the center of the eyes. The lips will be at the bottom of the round shape as we did as well on the side view. I'm just going to put some cheekbones in just to sort of show you how the face would work. Now this is all okay for a face that looks straight at you, but sometimes a person may look up. So I'm just going to demonstrate taking all these measurements a little bit more upwards, which will give us a face looking towards the ceiling. So what you do is you keep all your same measurements, but just reduce the forehead. So now that center line won't be in the middle anymore because this person's looking up. That center line of the eyes will be higher up. So we can place that following that sort of round tire shape higher up there. Now we can just place the features of the nose and the jaw exactly like we did before, but just a little bit higher now. And this would work the same if somebody was looking down. You would just bring that line of the eyes down on the ball shape, and then you'd have more forehead and less nose and mouth area. And that way you can turn the face any which way you like. Okay, so let's get back to our normal front-facing head. So we've got him back, and now I'm just putting in the ears, and the ears, of course, will be between the brow line and the bottom of the nose. So this is sort of the standard measurements for a front-facing head. Okay, so I've spoken to you about all the horizontal measurements, so the rule of thirds and all of that. But there's also some vertical idealized measurements that Loomis speaks about, so let's put those in. So according to Loomis, you can divide the front plane of the head up into 5 widths, and these widths are exactly 1 eye width wide. So you'll have one on the side, then 1 eye, then the middle of the brow, 1 eye, and then one on the side again. And at the outside of this line of the width of the eye will be the high point of the brow. The nose will be exactly in between in that mid section. The chin will be slightly wider than the nose and will come to about that halfway mark of the shape of the eye. So if one eye is a unit, the chin will be 2 units wide. And don't worry, I'll map out these measurements at the top later as well. Now let's talk about some more horizontal measurements. So the mouth lines up exactly with the bottom of the ball, like we said before, but the breaking point of where the jaw gets a little bit more narrow is also exactly at that point. So let me just plot out the measurements on the side there. And as you can see, we can divide the face up into 3 thirds, with the top third being the beginning of his hairline, the middle third being the brow line to the bottom of the nose, and the bottom third being the nose to the bottom of the chin. Now if you divide that bottom third again up into 3 thirds, you'll have the bottom of his lower lip and the start of his chin. The middle third will have 3 thirds as well, and at the top section of that area you'll have the eyes. The final third at the top only has the hairline. Now let's look at the horizontal measurements. So let me divide up this area into 5 units. So the outsides of those units would be the side of that wheel shape that we said is the skull. The middle will be the center line. Eyes, the sides of the eyes will be 1 unit. So as you can see, the outer side of the eye and the high point of the brow is 1 point. The inner eye plus the side of the nose will be another point. And this divides the face up into more or less easy to figure out measurements. But one thing to realize is that these are ideal. Not everyone's face is exactly shaped like this, so we're going to have to make some changes to make this look like our model. For instance, when I look at him, his chin to his nose is actually not 1/3. He's actually got a much lower chin. I see the bottom of his eyes, the corners of his eyes to his mouth being exactly the same measurement as his mouth to his chin. So I'm going to lower that jawline right there. Secondly, I don't think he's got quite that wide a chin. I think it lines up more with the sides of the nose. So I'm going to narrow it down as well. And I see the corners of his mouth line up exactly with the middle of his eyes. The high point of his brow is actually not at that outer corner. His brow extends a little bit further. And it then arches down quite sharply, almost to the corners of the eyes. So what I'm basically trying to do is see what the ideal measurements are and how he deviates from those to get a semblance of a likeness. So the next thing I see is that actually he's got a lot of hair. His skull's a lot longer than the ideal ones. So I'm going to put extra mass on that. And the skull shape is always the most important area for a likeness. You can fiddle with the eyes till forever, or the nose, or all the little features, but when you don't have the right skull shape, you won't get a real likeness. And I see that he's got a white point that lines up with the start of his hairline in his hair there. And you can see how this gives us a much more closer likeness than the idealized measurements. So they're a really good starting point and great if you're going to be drawing from imagination, but they won't give you, of course, they won't give you everyone's face. Now lastly, he's actually not looking straight at us. He's actually looking a little bit away from us. So all that, in that case, I need to do is add a little bit more width on the side that's facing us a little bit more. So I'm going to do that now. So this works as well if he be turned the other way. So when somebody's looking upwards, you see more of their mouth area. If somebody's looking downwards, you'll see more of their forehead area. And if somebody's looking left or right, you'll see more of the side that's turning towards you. So that's a good way to turn a face however way you'd like. All right, so that's it for the 20-minute pose. I hope that was useful, and I will see you in a second for the 30-minute pose. So here we are for the last pose already, and we're going to make this a little bit more difficult because he's going to be 3/4. And for people who've watched my videos before, you'll probably know that somebody who looks straight up towards you or clean profile is a lot easier to draw than somebody who looks a little bit away from you. And this is because your brain, for some reason, has the tendency to draw the head towards you so it looks you in the eye. Okay, so we're going to start with that same ball and we'll cut the sides off straight away as well. So we're going to make a sort of tire shape. The center line in this case won't be in the middle because he's looking away from us a little bit. So I've put that in a little bit more to the left. I'm now putting in that center line for the chin and those sort of slices on both sides. Now, if I divide that little slice on the right there up into 4/4 like we did with the first pose, you can see that the ear can be located quite easily. The ear would always be located in the lower back area. Okay, so his lips are going to be, as we said before, at the bottom of that circle, so we can place those quite easily. And then we can divide up the face into thirds again, chin to nose, nose to brow, brow to hairline. His jaw will go from the bottom of that ball towards the center of the chin. And like we learned before, the eyes, the corners of the eyes and the lips will both be 2/3 up into their own segment. And I hope this is not too confusing. I've really tried to simplify all the measurements in the actual books. There are a lot more measurements and idealizations, but I've tried to pick out the most important ones and the easiest to explain, and the ones that I use myself as well the most. So I hope it's not too confusing. All right, so let's divide up the front of his face into 5 sections again. And the middle section will be his nose and space between the eyebrows. The second section will be his eyes. And the last section will be his eye to the side of his head. So like we did in the front facing one, we're going to be using those vertical measurements to see where his mouth is and his chin. So let's put in the features the way we learned in the second pose as well. So let's start with the angle of the brows. And And I will continue now with the rest of the features. For instance, the side of the jaw there, that lines up with the bottom of the mouth. Now, like I said before, not every face is ideal, so he's got a lot more mass on the top of his head, so I'm going to put that in next. I'm just going to continue drawing that big mass for a little bit and speak to you in a second. In the meantime, if you have anything that's unclear, just don't hesitate to ask me in the comments. So now I've got the mess of the hair in, and most of his features, using the method we spoke about in the 20-minute post, I'm actually going to take this drawing a little bit further and start shading. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at what side the light is coming, and I'm going to shade in everything that I see should be in shadows on the darker side. So you can see how much shading contributes to a face that looks 3D. Now, next, what I'm going to do is I'm very lightly going to sketch the planes in, meaning these are the main sides of the features and the skull, and these might be useful for you to realize what bits you need to shade and what bits you don't have to shade. Now, this is optional, you don't really have to follow this, and I will also delve deeper into this in a following video, but it might be useful now while we're shading. Okay, so now we've got those planes in. You can see that some of them turn slow and some of them turn quickly. So for instance, on the side of his nose there, they turn quite quickly. So that's where I'm going to put a line, and anywhere where you can imagine they're round or slow, I'm going to blur slightly with my finger. And you could do this in charcoal or in pencil. If you are using paint, I would say drag the brush across to blur and put a fresh brush mark down to make it a harder edge. And we've done this technique before, I think 2 videos ago. It's a really easy and intuitive technique for me to get a sense of mass and volume to a face or any object. So I constantly put on new, fresh marks with a sort of slightly darker tone and then blur out other bits that I am sure are actually going away softly. And as you can see, the light's actually coming from the lower bottom right side. So every mass will cast its shadow. So his nose is casting shadow upwards into the eye, and the mass of his lips is casting a shadow upwards towards his cheek. And so thinking about stuff in masses like that for me is really, really useful. Now, of course, this whole shading and edge work is completely optional. If you find yourself still struggling with the construction of the drawing, that's absolutely fine as well. I just wanted to show you how this sort of can be pushed further and create a well-structured face like that. Okay, so this is the end pretty much of the last pose. I hope that you have enjoyed yourself and you found the Loomis method a little bit useful. And don't forget, we do a new figure drawing pose every week. We've got Mango coming back next week, I believe. And hopefully see you then or next Sunday.
Thank you for taking part. Don't forget to photograph your work and post it on Instagram and hashtag it with #RawUmberLive. I'd like to thank Lizet Dingemans for drawing along with us today, and you can download the photographs you've seen in this week's session from the link I'm about to show you on the screen. As well as portrait drawing sessions, we have figure drawing sessions every Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. You can book on our website, rawumberstudios.com.